I'm telling you, when you start to align your antenna with folk faith and your blood memory and all of this stuff, you will start to see more supernatural things happen in your life, and supernatural communication from the other side. Sure, because remember, when we're talking about the situation at hand and the web of weird, basically we're talking about how we are all connected to each other, to folk consciousness, to our collective unconscious. And web of weird means, you know, we do have individual autonomy, but also we are all in this together. So there are elements of fate and the ongoings going on that will affect us as individuals, and then also be like echoed or fractaled out into the wider society. From Gunderson's Runes of the Elder Futhark in Teutonic Magic, page 91. The rune Isa, ice, is the elemental rune of Niflheim. As the being of fire is energy, expansion, motion, passion, and change, so the being of ice is solidity, contraction, stillness, calmness, and unchangeability. Although Niflheim holds the primal life stuff of yeast and the death stuff of venom, these cannot come forth directly from the ice. It must first be melted into the rushing waters of Hvergelmir. The elemental ice shows complete immobility, which in its ultimate form is antimatter, and without the motion which holds the substance of the atom together, there would be complete disintegration. So now this is important, because the immobility, this was something that was going on for me personally, grappling with all of these issues and grappling with coming to like the understanding of what we're dealing with and how to move forward. And, you know, it can get so overwhelming when you're walking through a minefield and you're dealing with false players in your midst that you haven't even recognized. So there is I think a reason that I felt immobile. And it does have to do with the motion and the expansion and the energy that was going on around. But this also correlates to the situation that the West is facing right now too. Because again, this is a time of flux and change. But without the right energy and without the right focus, we won't be guiding that change ourselves. And if we're immobile, then the forces who are against us will make the change instead of us. I had to step away from the chaos and the noise in order to solidify intention, focus, concentration, and density of intention. You must not forget how closely Niflheim, the realm of ice, and hell are bound together in the northern mind. Now, this is actually crucial when the afterlife and damnation and, a place of torment is being promoted by some people in the heathen scene. Now, remember, in the Norse tradition, Hel is not the Christian hell. They used that term purposefully for the reason of trickery. They were tricking us. To reach the realm of hell, you must lower your own vibrational level. This bridge is broad because this is very easy to do and is in fact the ordinary way of the soul after death. This may be set against the purifying flames, intense vibration of the narrow bridge Bifrost. Hell is also where many of our ancestors are residing, and this is actually going to connect to folk faith, because folk faith, in the folk tradition, there is a conflation between the realm of the dead and the realm of fairy and fae and supernatural. So that's important. But also, when he says to connect to this realm, you must lower your own vibrational level. And that also seemed to coincide with this stillness. Here I'm trying to ascertain why I feel frozen and stuck. Well, it's because there has been so much going on all around. So much going on all around that I needed to be encased in this sort of ice in order to find a stillness through the chaos and through the nonsense that's in our midst. Like I said, so far, Teutonic Magic by Gunderson for me, in learning the runes, has been the book that I'm turning to the most out of the several that I have, because it's in depth and it makes a lot of sense. Isa, the eye rune, is also the strength of the ego. And it is a bridge also in the sense that it provides safe passage through the turbulent waters of initiation. So if we want to advance and we want to move forward, the ice has to break. And the ice breaking is also like the facade breaking, the mirror shattering, the mirror that was giving us a false illusion shattering. And so if there are people to practice folk faith and what this means, but if you look to our fairy tale tradition, that's a theme in the fairy tales. I mean, you can even in some of the earliest Disney films actually were very good for folk understanding. Snow White and Sleeping Beauty especially. But Snow White had to deal with the witch who was in disguise, posing as someone very kind, just a peddler, offering her, wants to help her. And what happened when she ate of that apple? That was not the apple of life. That was the apple that put her to sleep, being encased in ice. If we are listening to people in disguise, posing as benevolent, here, folk, I'm one of you, I'm speaking the lingo, here, have my apple. But it's not Iduna's apples of life. It's a poisoned apple. Well, then we are not going to have this breakthrough to move into the next stage of development and understanding. If we don't have the inner strength to deal with the hard stuff, what are we even doing? The wizard and the Reich is going to see things that the Carl in the Shire is not looking at. And so, I'm not going to tell you, trust me, but I am going to tell you that you need to start learning your discernment and listening for the wisdom and of the wise ones and learning for yourself. This person seems like someone who has steered us right, who seems to have insight and knowledge. And you know what? I'm going to hear them out because I trust their intentions, and I'm going to give it a fair shake and hear what they have to say before making a knee-jerk react. The chaos element is very much at work so that people don't know which end is up. If you don't have a strong inner character, you would never be able to withstand what I've been dealing with for 2 years. And I don't even have the freedom or ability to say everything. And you wouldn't understand it unless you were on this path. Walk a mile in my shoes. Elvis sang that song. Before you accuse, criticize, and abuse, walk a mile in my shoes. And the thing is, if you're a Carl in the Shire, you're not meant to walk the path of the Reich and the wizard. You're not. You're meant to thatch the roofs, and that's an important job because everybody has a roof. We need the Carls in the Shire doing their thing. But what the Carls have to start to understand is that the path of the Volvas and the wizards and the Reichs, we are going to be dealing with things that you can't even begin to comprehend, and we're happy to do it because that's our job. That's my job. That's what I'm here to do. I do recommend that everyone promote the folk in their own way, and it is all hands on deck. And we all do need to be speaking and studying and growing together. But part of this is also reestablishing our natural roles in our Aryo-Teutonic society to do their thing. And so, for me, drawing the Isa rune and the strength of the ego, this was a refining period for me also in my understanding. And when he says the safe passage through the turbulent waters of initiation, 100%, 100%, that's what I've been dealing with. And not everybody is called. The fairy tale hero's journey is something that is a metaphor for every single one of us in Midgard. However, not everyone is called to the shaman's journey or the Reich's journey, or the wizard's journey. If you're called to the Thatcher's journey, that's hugely important too. Everybody needs a roof, but you're going to be busy. You're going to be absorbed in your work, thatching the roofs to keep the rest of us comfortable and safe and dry, and keep the tribe functioning, the thatchers and the smiths and the bakers, and the fishwives and whoever else. These are all very important roles. But the role of the wise one or the Reich is very difficult. It's very difficult and it's very dangerous. I had these massively profound spiritual experiences that I recognize now as initiatory. And so being told by the runes that this was going to be the moment that the ice broke, that was significant because it was a strengthening of my own ego, in understanding my role and embracing it and owning it and standing strong in the face of adversity and removing yet another layer of blindness to see threats that are right in front of all of us. And it's a threat to every single one of us in Midgard. And I drew the Isa rune. And so it is about strengthening that ego and safe passage through the turbulent waters of initiation. And that's what the past year or so has been for me. Turbulent waters of initiation, going into the next level of reclaiming our indigenous tribal worldview. If you start to actually look to our folk wisdom and our ancient wisdom and our sacred script and the metaphysical insight, spiritual insight that it has to offer, this made so much sense for me. So when he says it, because the strength of the ego, safe passage through the turbulent waters of initiation, guards the ego by holding the Vitki's concentration firm and warding it against the stresses placed on it, providing a sound mental footing as you travel through the dark abyss. Yes, 100%. I see now how these powers that be that have been with me on this entire journey, and they're with you too. They're not just, because I'm special. No, they're with every single one of us if we strip away the blinders that are stopping us from seeing it. There is chaos, confusion, and the Isa rune seems to me to have a lesson for all of us. And I've been telling people, get away from the alt-right. Get away from them. Stop listening to them. If you see a pagan person all over the alt-right, that's probably a sign that either their discernment is off, their antenna isn't tuned, or there's something more malicious going on. But when you're exposing yourself to the chaos, then you are unfocused and you're not zeroed in on the path, nested in what's happening with all of us. And so I would just reiterate that it is time to narrow our focus and our resolve, but also have a protective barrier from the chaos. But what I've learned this week is that the chaos is operating on a deeper level than we know, and the concept of shapeshifters and people in disguise using our lingo to parade as us, this should be actually frightening and sinister. But this should be nothing new. If we were looking to the folk faith, we would have seen this over and over again in our fairy tales, and to learn to have wisdom to not be fooled by the trickery. And there's been a lot of talk. Some people around in my midst have been very critical of Asatru, and that's not something that I've wanted to get on the bandwagon with, because I was just simply looking at Asatru as another interpretation on our faith, and I was looking at it as in devoted to the Aesir gods of the north and this and that. But I have been forced by this situation, by the ice breaking, by the rushing waters that poured out when the ice finally broke. I have been forced to look with new eyes on this situation. And when you do see people twisting our faith into an Abrahamic pattern, that should raise alarm bells. And another thing is that there's some really important points missing from Asatru. And so I had actually counter-signaled Varg on it before his channel went down when he was criticizing Asatru, because I didn't understand where his criticisms were coming from. But now through this experience, I have now taken some of the input from others, from Varg, from Aerith Harger, and from others just like in my own circles who have been like intensely pushing that their alarm bells and their intuition has a problem. And this is tricky. This is tricky because I want to be careful how I word these things, and I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not telling people to go out there and counter signal Asatru. I think community building is really important right now. And I think finding people that share our worldview is really important right now. So I'm not ever going to counter signal that. But something that has been missing from Asatru are, number one, a heavy emphasis on reincarnation, and number two, a heavy emphasis on animism. After I went through my metaphysical, sort of supernatural initiation, well, I never had this idea that I would go out and become a shaman or a vulva or anything like that. It wasn't in my plan for my life. But I was initiated nonetheless. And it's all going together to help me understand, And if I can share this out loud as I'm grappling with my understanding, maybe it will help some other people in their process. Put one person above another as some sort of like prophet, because we don't have prophets. That's an Abrahamic concept. But tuning your antenna and honing, your skills. And it can happen to anyone in different ways. It can be through art. If you're really good at art, the process of creation, many artists will say that there's a supernatural element to it that's working through them to create the piece, especially if there's a spiritual component to the art. The same thing will happen with music. So if you're a musician and you've let your guitar get rusty or whatever your instrument is, pull it out, start playing again. These are all different ways. For me, it's much more nerdy. It's doing research and writing. But through that process, I have felt another hand guiding, spiritual shamanic experience, sitting by a stream, leaning against a tree beside a stream is a big one, where the sort of this conductive energy and the antenna allows for transmission. So reincarnation is huge. It's huge, and it is in our fairy tale lexicon, and it is in our northern lexicon. There was a paper online. Let me see if I can find it for you really quickly. Because some of these people who seem like they're actually working to guide our people off track seem to be counter-signaling the idea of reincarnation. this idea that we might be permanently in the hall, the mead hall, where we're feasting forever, almost like as if it's heaven and we're not going to reincarnate. That had been suggested by some of these people. It does occur to me that this denial of reincarnation is huge as part of this historical plan. But anyway, I was looking at that, and I was looking at how people had permission to worship Charlemagne. And I was looking at the cathedrals, and I was thinking about feudalism and how Christianity was used as the tool to enslave us under feudalism. And I was picturing these like feudal serfs being funneled into the cathedrals for their indoctrination. And then somehow or another, I was looking at Chairman Mao in China in his crystal mausoleum. And there's videos of these, under communism, these Chinese serfs. And the Chinese serfs were forced to line up outside the crystal mausoleum after working in the fields all day to go view the body of Mao. And then there's video of the same thing going on in Russia with Lenin and his body being preserved. And I started noticing, holy shit, this is the evil empire. I was looking into these mausoleums and these Mao, Lenin. I was looking into also Charlemagne and the cult of saints, and these, they call them indestructible bodies or incorruptible bodies, incorruptible saints, because they're supposedly their bodies won't decay, and so they put their bodies on display. And that obviously they were lying and they were tricking people, because just like with Lenin and Mao, they were always using whatever technology they had at the time to preserve these bodies. You know, why are these elites going to Bohemian Grove, and why are the Hollywood elites all in practicing Kabbalah and these secret societies and this and that? What are they actually doing? And then there's all kinds of like cockamamie, ridiculous theories all over YouTube, and nobody's talking about the biggest, most important point, that all indigenous worldviews believed in reincarnation. They all believed in reincarnation until when Abrahamism came around and started insisting that we don't reincarnate. And then they've been flooding us through their like creepy death cult temples. It's all over the Catholic Church, you know, the veneration of dead bodies. It's sick. You know, Chairman Mao, Lenin. And then you watch that scene in Cleopatra, and they're standing in front of Alexander's tomb, and it's just like that. And if you watch the scene, literally they talk about one people under one empire. And he says word for word, this is a plan that's too much for one lifetime. So circling this back, the reason I brought this up in the first place was, you know, I never intended to go out there counter-signaling a Satru. But when all these people are sort of making these points, and then you've got Varg talking about like a shallow version of paganism that seems like a Christian version, I never hear these people emphasizing reincarnation. And it has basically been emphasized to me in my studies and in my tuning my antenna and coming into greater alignment, you know, with the folk soul and blood memory and all this stuff. It has been emphasized more and more and more how important reincarnation is. So you do have to wonder why it's like completely absent from conversation in Asatru circles, when it is like one of the most important elements of indigenous faith for all people all around the world in their natural state of being. The etymology for druid means oak wise, those who know the wisdom of the oak. Then we go back to Anglo-Saxon, we had the wizards, the ones who were very wise. And if you go back into the Anglo-Saxon language, the same word for truth was our word for tree, right? So it seems to me that the spirits in the trees. Now, Tolkien knew this because Tolkien wouldn't have made the trees conscious. He made them conscious entities when he made the Ents. If we knew that truth and trees were the same, and if our wise ones were the ones who became oak wise, why is animism like completely absent from Asatru? A belief in reincarnation and wrapping your head around that and attuning yourself so that you can try to understand all of this is key and crucial, not only to getting an authentic, indigenous, spiritual worldview back again, but also to helping us navigate what's going on right now. Because everybody right now are still mind-controlled, lost sheep who are drifting, and they can't connect to history. They think, oh, the slaughter at Verdun was so long ago, it doesn't matter. We should let it go. The witch trials were so long ago, it doesn't matter. We should let it go. No, we are still in the same phase of history now. So if you want to understand what's going on right now and what we need to do to get our culture back, you have to make reincarnation and connecting to the past a crucial part of your own worldview and your paradigm shift. But connecting to the spirits of nature and the earth is a huge part of it, because part of what they did to us, part of the mind fuck, was they took us out of Midgard. And this idea that spirituality lives in some other realm, on some other planet somewhere, that we need like some special technology to communicate with the being on the other planet. That's Abrahamic horseshit. The powers that be, the entities, the spiritual entities are all around us. And our gods are not separate from nature. The concept of the gods is complex. Are they their own consciousness and personalities? Yes. Are they also embodied in natural phenomenon like thunder and lightning and sunshine and rain and springtime and fall? Are they embodied in that too? Yes. Are they connected to the animistic whites all around us? Yes. And it pleases the gods when we are in tune with an animistic understanding and we are functioning together with these animistic spirits. What am I going to do in my practice and to move forward? And now that I see very clearly the agents of chaos and the elements, and I understand why I was encapsulated in ice, and now it's time to move forward and connect. And I thought, for my birthday, I think the gift to myself and to the whites around me, that I decided to stop neglecting the whites of my own property. So I ordered stuff for the birds. And then that's what I'm going to do as my offering to the whites on this land. So if you're like, okay, folk faith, what is folk faith and how should I practice? And I am going to be stepping up my game too and stop neglecting these spirits of nature. Varg has talked about how the birds are messengers to the other realms. Our ancestors thought that too. And pretty much every indigenous worldview worldwide thought that too. And so being nice to the birds around you is probably a good place to start. But also to the trees. And if you look at even much more recent Icelandic folklore, for example, when people were disrespectful to the whites of place, and the elves believed to live in certain rock formations or whatever, the people who were behaving this way also experienced bad luck. So according to tradition, being respectful and honoring these animistic nature spirits and the whites, the elves, the fairies, and whatever, does elicit blessings in your life. Communing with the birds, feeding the birds, providing bird houses on your property, whatever, is a good place to start with a folkish, folk faith, animistic practice. Why we do need our wise ones and our Reichs keeping an eye out for us, so that when we see trickery and we see bad players in our midst, we can let our people know, because there are several stages in history where I'm quite confident that they were playing on the same exact things that they're playing on right now. So right now, going back to the beginning, we have a lot of people with good intentions who realize that we're being led astray, that the left is fomenting chaos and free-for-all and decay, but what they're not realizing is that this is being used to funnel us into a false right wing that's not here to help us out. So looking at history, there are many examples where this has happened, and the Protestant Reformation is a huge one. And then you go into the Enlightenment, which continued to desacralize the earth. And the Enlightenment, moving into the age of science, also coincided with the onset of industrialization, pulling people out of the countryside, which was again another economic shift and another mode of society shift. And thanks to having to look at Victor Rydberg, I was led to Benjamin Kidd, who wrote back in 1894 that society is driven by religious beliefs. So if they can control the ideology, they can better guide society. So if we want to get ourselves shifted back to where we need to be, we do need a folk faith revival, but folk faith cannot be separate from an emphasis on animism. It all goes together. It all goes together because it's part of our being mind-controlled herded sheep. It's also part of our being rendered impotent and neutered because we don't have these tools anymore that our ancestors once had. You know what? If we want to get back into an animistic worldview based on animism and ancestor veneration and reawakening this part, probably we should be all engaging in Claude Lecoteau book club. We should all be engaging in ancestor veneration. That's important. We'll talk more about that in future. And I'm 100% sure that Snorri Sturluson was probably more sinister than we think. Honestly, based on what I've been forced to look at, these characters that show up throughout the ages trying to turn our lore into Bible patterns, because it's all patterns of thought. And so I would just say, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to say to completely reject all the stories in the prose Edda, but probably the poetic Edda is the one you want to pay more attention to. And it's super important not to neglect our folklore and our fairy tales, because you're going to find examples of animistic spirits all over the folklore, but you're also going to find real deities, real gods in the fairy tales, real gods in the folklore, in the folk tradition, in the ballads. That's where we need to go once again. If we want to actually revive real folk faith, we need all hands on deck, but follow what you're interested in. Because if you follow what speaks to you, more will be revealed to you. Things will fall. It's exactly like a fairy tale journey. More truth will fall into your path, and you will be guided, and you will start to have supernatural experiences. So, if there's a fairy tale character or character of legend that always sort of stood out to you, follow that trail. Go read some more variations, more versions of the fairy tale, of the legend. Look into the origins of it. Do a little digging. Absorb yourself in it. Because it's through this absorption that you realign your antenna, and then you begin to transmit, and you begin to see with new eyes, and they begin to communicate with you more. Some of these tales are just amusing. Some of them are just kind of fluffy and told for fun. It's not like every single tale has something hugely insightful, but there will be tales that pop out to you. And this is what you should look for. You should look for tales where the character has to go on a journey. That's a big one. Tales that involve transformation. That's a big one. like the Frog Prince transforms. That's almost like breaking a curse. That's also like me with being encapsulated in the ice, breaking that ice. That's also like, because what happens in these tales of transformation, there's like a violent episode that has to occur in order for the character to get their true form back. That's sort of like breaking the ice and the raging waters rushing through in order for this transformation to occur. So you look for things like that. You look for clues like that one that I talked about in the 3 Golden Hairs, where the character crosses the Black Sea to go on his journey. That is sort of a shamanic trip going into the other world. Thomas the Rhymer, you look for clues like if the character is leaning against a tree beside a stream, the well in the tree, and then they go on a supernatural journey. They go through a cave and come out on the other end. This is sort of like the transmission between our world and the other world. You look for if you see somebody in 3s showing up. The Norns show up that way. In the 3 heads of the well, the Norns show up as these 3 floating heads in a well. Sometimes you have Nornic figures that are not always in 3. Sometimes you'll just get 1. So those are just sort of clues to look for. Look for when the character is being tested and what that could mean for your own journey and your own discernment. Folk faith was preserved by the folk, unbroken. We've lost more in just the past 80 years than in the past 800 years. It was preserved among our folk. Reading the lore, participating in the customs as you can, depending on where you are, your situation. And then most importantly, especially something that's very easy for solitary people to do, is reigniting the animistic part of it and the world around you and the animal, ancestral, and animistic spirits around us. Understanding our worldview once again with the tiered system of Areo-Teutonic society. And it doesn't mean first class, second class, third class. It does not mean that any one is more valuable or more important than the other. It just means there's 3 different roles to be played. And understanding the role of Carls, the role of the Jarls, and the role of the Reichs. So this is important. This is something that also has been emphasized for me and understanding my role, so that it's uncanny that I drew this particular rune here now that the ice is broken, and it's reaffirming the Areo-Teutonic system, which I started out talking about in the beginning. And I do feel, in the Germanic naming system, our names have meaning, and I do have 2 out of 3 of these in my name. I have the Carl and the Reich present in my name. So I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that that's part of what I'm here to do. So, if you think these talks are helpful, I appreciate the support. Getting yourself involved in the runes, getting yourself involved in folklore, reading these researchers who are looking into our ancestral tradition. And if you want to attune your antenna so that you can start having these experiences and so on, I can't emphasize enough, stop feeding your mind crap. If somebody is just a shit for brain like donkey, like waving a carrot for the other donkeys on YouTube, unsubscribe. Don't feed your mind that crap. Feed your mind the things that are going to help you grow, inspire you, that you learn from, so on and so forth. So thanks, guys. Feel positive because this is the age of the ice breaking, and it's going to get messy sometimes. So when the ice breaks, the raging river might pour through. But this is, destruction for creation, and this is going to have to happen if we want to get ourselves back to our natural way of being once again. So feel positive.